Hey everyone, I hope you're in for one hell of a ride, because I'm the one that's gonna be driving. Let's get to the stories. If it had been just me, I would have been willing to believe that the whole ride was just some sort of terrifying hallucination. But it wasn't just me. Allison and Mitra stepped into the taxi with me, and they both remember the exact same thing. It was last Saturday. We were at the birthday party of one of Allison's high school friends. Mitra and Allison's little sister tagged along just because she happened to be in town. I think she mostly came along because she knew some of the guys that would be around. The party went into the early morning hours. A few minutes after 2 a.m., I called the taxi. The agent told us a car would arrive within less than 10 minutes. Standing at the side of the road, the first raindrops hit our heads. Allison fled under my coat with a squeaking noise, and Mitra, an honest third wheel, looked on with the confusion of disgust, jealousy, and amusement. We saw the taxi moving around the corner. It seemed unusually slow, but else the car looked alright. We flagged the car down, squeezed on the back seat, and told the driver the address to our apartment. Without a word, he began driving. The first few minutes seemed normal, but then there was a certain tension in the air, something that kept us from talking among each other. I figured the driver was just tired and uninterested in idle and repetitive conversation. Still, his silence and his stiff focus on driving made my hands turn cold. He kept driving slowly, but worse was that his tiredness seemed to impact his reaction time. Every curve was taken just a moment too late. Each time his hands lingered on the steering wheel for a moment longer than they should have. The car came to a halt at a red light. His brake was a bit too late and too harsh. At least we didn't drive into the crossing. I realized that I had no idea where we were. I, sitting right behind the driver, and with Allison to my right, knocked on the thin plastic wall that separated him from us. "Hey," I said, "are you okay?" No reaction. "Sir, are you okay?" "Maybe deaf," whispered Allison. She giggled. Mitra just shrugged. I knocked harder and finally he moved. It was a jerking motion, as if my knock had startled him. Still, he did not turn around. "Hey," I said, "are you sure you can drive?" His reaction was nearly inaudible, a faint groaning noise that I took as a yes. Mitra gestured towards the door. "Sir," I said, "I think we are good here. We will stay here, thank you. How much is it?" The red light turned green. The motor howled loudly and the car started moving. "Hey, we want to get out!" It was as if he didn't hear me. The car kept accelerating. Within a few seconds, we were at least going twice the speed limit. Allison, Mitra, and I were screaming. My fists were pounding against the plastic. He ignored us. The car didn't slow down even once. Despite all the curves seemingly taken far too late, despite the narrow roads and the traffic, the car didn't slow down even once. I tried to push my hand through the pavement hole. The plastic cut into my arm, and I kept pushing forward, but my arm got stuck in a painful position. "Stop!" I screamed. "Why don't you stop?" Within less than 5 minutes, we were out of town. I hadn't realized that we were so near to the outskirts already. It was as if he planned it all along, to bring us outside town, probably to rob or at least blackmail us. Mitra was the one creative enough to pull her phone out. She called the emergency number, but somehow her phone didn't get connection. With my phone, we had more luck. The connection was there. I heard the dial tone. Then there was just white noise. I screamed our plight into the phone, hoping that someone would hear us. All the while, the car, if anything, kept going faster and faster. Houses I didn't know flew past. Finally, they gave way to a sparse forest. Still at high speed, we turned off the street onto a dirt pathway without a sign. The tires were screeching. We were thrown from one side to the other on the back seat. At one point, the car even felt as if it would topple over at any moment. The driver stayed perfectly calm. We couldn't see his face, but he seemed perfectly composed. The dirt pathway went on and on. The speed decreased slightly. We passed parked cars, some with their doors open, some had smashed windows. The trees to both sides of the pathway stood closer and closer. Barely any light seemed to pass between them. Then the clearing opened up. A wide clearing with parked cars in several spots. Cars, and people standing between them. People that began to run towards us. The taxi brushed against another parked taxi. The brakes screeched. The car slid sidewards, turned nearly 180 degrees, and then came to a sudden halt. The people ran towards us. Allison was the one that pressed the door locks down. We were screaming and staring at the running figures. I screamed, "Fucking drive!" Only then I looked at him again. Saw that the driver had turned around. Saw that there was no face except for a horizontal red cleft where his eyes should have been. The cleft seemed to be opening further. A figure slammed against Mitra's door. She screamed. Allison screamed. I screamed. The driver began hammering against the plastic that separated us from him. A figure appeared at my window. He, if I can call it that, pulled the door handle and luckily failed. Despite his lack of a face, he seemed angry. His whole body seemed to teem with rage. Another figure jumped on the roof. The driver's fists pounded harder and harder. The cleft of the figure outside my window widened. With his hand still on the door handle, he leaned backwards. His arms were shaking. With a loud metallic sound, he flew backwards and to the ground. The door handle was still in his hands, but not anymore attached to the car. The plastic in front of me cracked. I saw black pieces falling off his equally black hands. There were at least 20 of them, maybe 30. More seemed to be coming out from between the trees. A figure jumped against the front window. Another body checked the passenger door next to Mitra. A figure at the back of the car pressed her cleft onto the back window, while her hands pounded against the glass. A piece of plastic flew against my face. The car jerked slightly forward. Allison screamed even louder. His completely black hand had pushed through the plastic and was grabbing for Allison's face. It was just a reflex. With all these things around, all I wanted was to get him off Allison. I grabbed the cold black arm and twisted it. A loud crack. The driver's second hand slammed against the plastic. A figure to my left started punching my window with the broken door handle. I pushed the arm forward, back towards the driver. His red cleft shivered. His hand twitched and bent to try and grab my hand. Some hard object hit the front window. I pushed his arm harder. Black pieces got stuck on the broken plastic, but his arm moved. It moved backwards and pushed his body away from us. Then the motor turned on. Within just a moment, the car started moving. The driver seemed more furious. His second hand hitting even harder against the plastic. The glass to my left was broken. A few fingers were pushed through the hole. They were grabbing towards me. Something jumped on the back of the car. The taxi slowly accelerated. It was as if his leg was stuck on the gas, and my pushing pushed his foot down slightly. More figures rammed against the sides of the car. The hole in the window to my left widened. Nearly the whole hand came through. I pushed harder against the arm. With a ripping sound, his arm moved further back to his side of the plastic. His hand grabbed mine and I grabbed his. His cleft stretched larger and widened again. His second hand tried to push through the hole. The car sped up. Another figure jumped on the hood and swung backwards to hit the front window with the stone. Just when his arm swung forward, he slipped and only scratched the glass. The driver made a huffing noise. His hand clawed into mine. I felt his nails digging deep in my flesh, but I held his arm in place. The car accelerated further, nearly towards the pathway where we had come from. Some of the figures to our side stumbled. The others fell behind. There was nothing I could have done to stop the crash. The car went onto the path. The figure on the hood was grasping to all sides to stay on the car. The driver's second hand cracked another part of the plastic. Mitra screamed and Allison ducked down. The taxi hit the tree with considerable speed. The figure on the hood of the car hissed loudly, and a black goo splashed over the front window. My head was thrown against the plastic. "Out!" screamed Mitra. She pushed the door open, and Allison was right behind her. The pain was horrible. I was disorientated. I didn't remember why I needed to hurry. My vision was partially gone. "Get out!" shouted a female voice. Somehow I managed to open the door. Someone pulled me outside. "Come on, come on!" They pulled me forward. We passed another car. Somehow my feet began to move. I heard something running towards us. "This one," shouted a female voice. I saw Allison open the door to another car. The car's windows were all smashed. "We have to run," I said. Mitra pushed me on the back seat and climbed in after me. Allison was in the front. The footsteps behind us grew louder. The motor stalled. Allison cursed. It stalled a second time. Something moved in the forest to our right. I heard the motor jump on. Mitra screamed, "Hurry!" The car hit something, then rolled over something. I turned towards the back window. Two figures were running after the car. I saw the driver climbing out of the taxi. His cleft was wide open. The last thing I remember is a high-pitched noise. I woke up to the sound of sirens. I was lying and something held me down. There was a man's back right above my head, and the ground was swinging. Mitra came with me to the hospital. Allison was held at the station. The car in which we escaped, and its driver, had been missing for several months. Allison said the police didn't take her report very seriously. Still, they sent 2 cars to look for the forest. Somehow the description Allison gave was not enough. Allison later came to the hospital. They said they would investigate for stealing a car, and that the police would ask me questions about my head wound. The police never questioned me. They called Allison and Mitra for another round of questioning while I was still at the hospital. I was released 2 days ago. The same day, there was a small article on the front page of our local newspaper. Police officers still missing. The story in that article is very different. 2 officers examining a drug ring disappeared in one of the large local forests. Neither they nor their car was found. As said, I would be more than willing to believe this was all just some hallucination, but Allison and Mitra remembered the exact same thing. I feel like sharing something that happened to me last night. So for some background, I'm an average-sized 17-year-old girl, and I live in a small city in northern Canada. I was hanging out with my friends, just a typical Saturday night, and around 12:30 a.m., I went back to my friend's house just to smoke some weed. So after a bit, I decide to walk home from his house. It's only a few minutes walking distance away, and so around 1:30 a.m., I start trekking in the cold and dark night to go home. But I wasn't too worried because the city I live in is pretty safe. When I'm about halfway home, a taxi van slows down and drives by me, going the same way I was. It makes a U-turn in front of me, drives by me again, honks, drives past me, and makes another U-turn behind me, and this time they come to a complete stop. I didn't get to see the driver, but the passenger was a 25 to 30-year-old man, and he proceeds to shout, "Hey sexy, you look hot. Want to come to a party?" Aside from the fact that this was creepy, I found it strange, for I was literally wearing my dad's sweater, my dad's jacket, plain black leggings, and big winter boots. I instantly freeze, and I think for a second maybe he thinks I'm a prostitute. But prostitution isn't common at all where I live, for it's not a big city at all, and it's very cold at nighttime during this time of year. After about 20 seconds of us just looking at each other and me frozen in fear, I can't think of what to do but just keep walking home, in the hopes they'll drive away. Of course, it didn't work out like that. They speed up, and the man gets outside of the van and starts running towards me. I instantly take off, but running in deep snow in big boots is quite hard. So what do? I take off both of my boots, carry them, and continue sprinting for my life. I turn, and instead of going home, I'm just twisting and turning through the streets. while the sky is kind of staggering, and the taxi is speeding behind much faster. I can't think of what to do except run through the graveyard nearby, run to the forest behind it, and there I ran along the paved trail in the forest until I got home, which took much longer, but I lost them. I rush inside, lock the doors and windows, and I sit in my living room all night with a knife in hand. Why I didn't call the police, I don't know. I was still stoned, and so not really thinking clearly. Also, my mom wasn't in town, so I was home alone. I eventually fell asleep for a while, and when I woke up in the morning, I called the police and told them everything that happened. They didn't find anything, but said they'd get back to me if they did. One summer, a friend and I took a trip to the US. We were both Irish guys in our early 20s with little money, taking Greyhounds and Amtrak from city to city. Since I was the more organized of the two, I looked after booking tickets and reservations. And when it came to hitting Chicago, I thought I'd struck gold by finding a room at the Hilton at a ridiculously affordable price. It seemed like a major upgrade on the livable dumps we'd been staying in. But as soon as we got off the 20-hour train journey from New Orleans, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. The hotel was in Addison, Illinois, not the Chicago neighborhood of Addison, where we'd been planning to stay. It was a blip on a map that, at the time, consisted of little more than a road sign, a petrol station, a White Castle, and our hotel, almost exclusively used by business executives. Luckily, the hotel offered a discount taxi service through a cab company they were affiliated with, and sent someone out to pick us up. This is where things took a turn. The guy shows up, pops the trunk, and just as we were putting our bags in, there was a roar from behind. "Hey, you can't take that cab. He has out-of-town plates. That's against the law." A burly cabbie was enraged by the fact that our driver had picked us up right in front of a queue of cabs awaiting customers. I got about 2 words into my explanation when our driver lunged for the guy, screaming, "You motherfucker, I'll kill you. I have my iron pipe right here, and I swear I'll beat you to death." Looking back, this is where we should have brought things to a halt. But the truth is, we didn't have enough money for a normal cab ride to somewhere so far out of town. So, being 2 awkward Irish guys, we just got into the car, gazed in the opposite direction, and hoped the matter would resolve itself. I'm not proud of that. After jumping back in the car, still cursing, the driver gunned it down the wrong side of the street at rush hour, evidently making up for lost time, while venting road rage in the direction of any honking horns. It smelled like he had been drinking, but bailing out genuinely seemed like a terrible idea. At some point, between claiming that he should have been a race car driver and calling us pussies for wearing seatbelts, he told us the story of how he recently beat the shit out of a customer who didn't tip him enough. In my head, I tried to play this off as just a slightly unnerving, if not terribly effective way of ensuring a handsome bonus. But the sight of my friend nervously counting a handful of sweat-soaked $1 bills gave me a sinking feeling. While I looked after booking the reservations, he was responsible for things like taxi fares. Between us, we had just enough cash to cover the fare before tip. This is where the implications escalated from vague threat to certain danger. The driver kept offering to show us his pipe, the same one he'd used to take care of the bad tipper. Despite our polite objections, he actually took the pipe out from under the seat, turning around to wave it at us with a manic laugh while the car sped on. I couldn't tell which was scarier, the feeling that we were about to crash any minute, or the looming confrontation when we would shortchange him. We were going so fast that the force of the wind coming through the open window took my breath away, intensifying the feeling of shock. Definitely the most distressing journey I have ever been on. Miraculously, the speeding had shaved valuable dollars off the total, leaving just enough for the fare and a small tip. We had just been saved by the very excess that had terrified us. I jumped out the moment we stopped, searching for help just in case things kicked off. But the driver seemed satisfied, gave us his card, and said to call him anytime. He would be glad to drink whiskey and get into some fights with us. No thanks. Once we got to the safety of our hotel room, we just sat there, shaking, trying to absorb what the fuck had just happened. This is a story my grandmother would tell me when she was trying to put the fear of God in me. When she was about 28 to 30 years old, she went to a major city for a business meeting. I can't remember the specific city, but it was like New York, with a huge amount of taxis and whatnot. She was supposed to meet someone at another destination, and had the hotel call a taxi. When she went outside to wait, she saw a taxi already outside. She assumed it was hers, and helped herself in. She didn't notice anything special about the taxi. She told the driver the address, and off they went. For about 10 minutes, she didn't notice they were going a weird way. After 15 minutes, she started getting worried and asked the driver where they were going. At this point, they were out of the major city, and she realized what kind of situation she was in. She tried talking to the driver, but he never spoke a word to her. She noticed they were getting closer to a skeezy hotel, so she made a decision. She noticed he never locked the doors, probably thinking she wouldn't jump out of a moving car. He didn't know my grandmother was a badass motherfucker who took care of 5 kids on her own and worked full time. She tucked her legs, opened the door, and rolled the fuck out. She ran as fast as she could and hid. She saw him go up and down the road a couple times, and eventually leave. When he finally left, she walked down the road to another hotel. She walked in and asked to use their phone. They actually said no. Then, she demanded to use their phone, in the same voice she uses now to make sure I know she's serious. Yeah, they let her use the phone. She called whoever she was supposed to meet and told them where she was and to bring the police. They came, she filled out a report, and left. The aftermath is that the police raided the hotel and found it to house kidnapped women who were forced to prostitute themselves. She told her friend that she wanted to cut the job short and go home. He told her, "You're not the type of woman to let getting kidnapped mess with your life." So she stayed in the same city she was kidnapped in, and finished her work. I love her.